Um, Welcome to our live stream. I've decided to do a live stream this time instead of a webinar, which is what we usually do when there's new announcements from the government about support that's available to you. Being, being our first one, I hope that it goes well, and please leave us your feedback on whether you think this is a good format for getting information to you quickly, how it compares to the webinars, whether you like it, whether there's anything you would like us to cover. We're also going to put a copy of it up onto YouTube afterwards so that if you miss it live, you're still able to access it afterwards. Okay, so the reason we're doing this today is because yesterday there were updates to the support that's available to businesses. First, I'm going to run through a couple of the new schemes that were announced, and then we'll kick into the updates to the job support scheme. The first one that I want to tell you about is the cash that's now available to businesses who are in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 lockdown where they are in the hospitality industry. For those businesses, there's now a little bit more funding available. On a monthly basis, when you are unable to be open, you would have access to a grant of between £934 a month and £2,100 a month, depending on the size of your business. That's just for hospitality businesses and just for the ones that are unable to open in Tier 2 and then 3. This is being given out by the local authorities, so very similar to the grants that we saw much earlier in the year on that were available for businesses at the beginning of lockdown. The other change that was announced is that self-employed people will have access to more grant money than they were going to be. When Rishi announced at the end of September that there was going to be a third and then fourth instalment to the SEISS grants, the small self-employed income support scheme grants, he announced that it would be 20% times 3 months of your previous profits. Previous grants have been much more generous, so it was maybe not a surprise, but it was a shame to see this one was going to be so low. This is now being doubled to 40%. That's only for the third instalment, the amount that's due in November. We don't yet know what the fourth instalment, which will be December, January, February, we don't know what that one will be yet. And to be honest, if they had announced it, they'd probably just change their minds in between now and then, for better or worse. That is what seems to be happening. Changing their minds brings me on to the main point of what I'm talking to you about today. So I would like to talk to you about the job support scheme, how it stayed the same and how it's changed. So the job support scheme, just to remind you, is replacing furlough. This is a scheme that allows you to keep employees on your books so long as they're able to do some work whilst you're open. The previous scheme said that you had to employ people and they had to work for at least 33% of their normal hours. Let's go through what's been updated. So this is available to business in any tier of lockdown, but the business must be facing considerable difficulty. And that's a new phrase I'm not sure I've seen before. Well, I certainly haven't seen before. I'm not certain that it's a new phrase. But they must be facing considerable difficulty. Whereas I think previously it was they must have been impacted adversely or something like that. And I think anyone could justify how they have been impacted adversely over the last 6 months. But considerable difficulty, facing considerable difficulty, is a different term. Not quite sure how they're going to measure whether someone has been facing considerable difficulty or not, because it's still quite a new scheme. But what we have seen is that they are looking at businesses, certainly big businesses, and saying, well, actually, did you need this money or not? So that's what the scheme is. What has stayed the same? If you're in Tier 3 and you are in a legally enforced lockdown, the government will pay 67% of, if your business is forced to close because of a legally enforced lockdown, then the government will pay 67% of people's wages and the employer does not need to pay any of their pay. That's staying the same. That's not changing. The differences relate to businesses where they are not being forced to close because of a legally enforced lockdown. In all of these job support schemes, the employer has to pay the employer's national insurance contributions and the employer's pension contributions. That hasn't changed either. In all of these schemes, the employee, the staff member, receives 67% of their normal pay for unworked hours. let's be clear, 67% of the unworked hours they will receive money for. Complicated enough already, and now they've gone and changed it. So what has changed? Under the old scheme, as it was announced 2-3 weeks ago, the employer was going to have to pay half of that 67%, and the government would pay the other half. Under the new rules, the government will pay 62% of the unworked hours, and the employer will only have to pay 5% of the unworked hours. So that's a big difference. It's gone from 50-50 to the government paying a lot more than they were before. I'll talk to you in a minute about why we think they've done that. Oh, and I'd like to show you, this is new to me, I'm going to try and show you, if it will let me. No, I don't think it will. I was hoping it would let me show you a page from my website. Not just being a shameless plug, but because I spent a bit of time last night working on a graph that I think is fantastic. This little image will show you, and you can find it on our website. We've got a COVID page, and if you have a look there, you'll be able to see what this means. Because the minimum number of hours that an employee has to work, the employees, if the business hasn't been forced to shut down, the employee must still be working some hours. But that's a variable. So let's say they're working 60% of their normal hours, then the government will pay 25% of their pay, and the employer has to pay 62% of their pay. So 60% for the worked hours and 2% for the ones that haven't been worked. It's incredibly complicated in terms of getting your head around how much the employer has to pay and how much the government will pay, and also how much the employee won't be receiving. So my suggestion is that you have a quick look at our coronavirus page on our website. Have a look at this diagram, because I think it will lay out for you visually rather than in numbers exactly what it means if an employee is able to work, say, 1 day a week, 2, 3 or 4 days a week. So have a look at that, please, after this. We'll drop you a link in the feed or something like that. Who knows how Facebook works. The other change, so that's the first change. Now the government are going to pay so much more, and the employer has to pay so much less. The other change is that whereas when it was first announced you had to do 30% of your week, 33% of your week, the employee had to be working. That's now dropped to 20%. So 20%, 1 in 5, it is effectively 1 day a week for a full-time person. So I think that kind of makes sense. They've dropped it from 33% to 1 day a week. It's maybe a bit easier for us to get our head around. Maybe it's more realistic that you could keep someone on at 20%. But I think that the other reason they've made this change is, as I was reading this morning from a couple of sources, under the old scheme, where it was the employer had to be working 33% and then the employer had to pay, it was effectively an extra 22%, it would have been cheaper for an employer to sack 1 in every 2 employees and keep the remaining 1 working full-time, instead of to put 2 employees onto this scheme. And I think that's just bonkers, and I think that's why they've made this change. They haven't said that they got it wrong before. It seems that this is going to be part of it. Now it is cheaper for the employer to keep everyone that they feel they should keep, whereas before it would have been cheaper to make some very difficult decisions, get rid of a few people, and they'd be paying less out of their pocket. So for that reason it makes sense that they've made this change. That's everything that's changed in the last day. More changes are happening all the time. So I'd ask if you want updates on what is happening. We're trying to write in plain English with pictures if we can, something on our website that explains what's going on as it happens. So please do keep an eye on that. We will post little messages to say that we've done that as well. If you've got any questions about the schemes or how they'll impact you, do just drop us a message. You can either do it on Facebook, Twitter, or an email. If you're a client, just send your normal person an email and we'll talk you through what's happened. And I hope that the resources that we're putting out there are resources that you're finding useful. If they are, please let us know. And if they're not, let us know what we could be doing differently. The point of this is to help you guys to understand what's happening and to make the business community stronger by sharing what we know and what we can do that helps you. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching.